Okay, how's it going, everyone? So if you want to know how to create a little side navigation with a hamburger menu, then you just landed on the perfect video, because in this video we're going to create this little hamburger menu with a bunch of animations, also hover effect on the navigation items using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And also this is an SVG. This is in the downloadable files down in the description below. As always, the code is down in the description below, so you can just go ahead and download it and compare it with your code if you just want to follow along. But if you want to code along, then I would suggest that you just download this delicious looking hamburger, and we're going to get right into the code just in a couple of seconds. If you stick around to the end of the video, I'm also going to refactor the JavaScript code and add a little special something to it. So if you're new to the channel, then please consider subscribing. I'm releasing new content on a regular basis. And if you're regular, then hey, welcome back. So let's just get started with the project I just created here. Let me just drag this to the right side. I created here an empty folder, just going to call it code. And I'm going to start up with a index.html file. And within here, shift exclamation mark is going to give us a boilerplate. And to change the title here to hamburger and menu. And that's basically it for this. I think I added the comma. Yep. So hamburger and menu. Okay, let's go down in our body tag. And let's first of all start creating our HTML. Now I'm going to go here with pretty simple HTML. So I'm just going to create a nav tag. This is going to have a class of menu. Then within here, I'm going to create a div with a class of hamburger. And this is going to include 3 lines. Yeah, let's just do 3 lines with a class of, so 3 divs. So created them, 3 divs. I'm going to multiply this times 3. Basically, this is going to give me 3 times the divs. Now, after the hamburger, menu, that is, I'm going to create a UL. This is going to have the class of drop and down. Basically, this is the drop down that you saw on the right side. It's not going to drop down, it's going to come from the left side, but nevertheless, we're going to call it drop down. We can also call it side. Should we call it side? No, I'm going to leave it as drop down. And this is going to include multiple LIs, which actually, let me put this in a parenthesis. So it's going to include LI with each LI is going to include the anchor tag. And yeah, I'm going to just leave it at the anchor tag for now. The href is going to go nowhere, and it's going to include the text. So each anchor tag is going to have the text of some text. First is going to be home. So I'm going to start up with home, and we're going to edit it as we go along. So home, and let's multiply this times 4, and there we go. So let's add to the hrefs a couple of hash. So it's not going to change anything when we click on it. And the second one is going to be services. Then the next one, instead of home, we're going to have our about, and the last one is going to be, select anything, and contact. Okay, so we have, let's just open this up. Right click, open with live server. If you don't have live server, then please check out my video on how to get started with Visual Studio Code. It's on my homepage and it explains everything. Okay, now after the nav bar, let's go down here. We're going to create a header, and this is going to contain a h1 with the text of burger. So burger, and it just didn't work. There we go. h1 with the text of burger. And after that, we're going to have an image. Now the source for the image is going to be that SVG that I just told you about. Again, it's in the download file, so I'm just going to grab it and drag it in here. Okay, so there's our SVG. Now we can go back to our index.html and just pass in the SVG here as hamburger, and there we go. Okay, you should already see your SVG. And that's pretty much it for HTML. We can now, let me just check. We have this, and this, and this. And yeah, we're done. So I'm just going to move on now to our CSS, and parallel to that somewhere along the code, I'm also going to create our JavaScript file. So let's just get started by creating our CSS file. So style, you can call it whatever you want, style.css. SCC is not what I want to call it, CSS. All right, and before we get started with our CSS, let's also include it. So link above the title, link tag, and style.css. You should already see it. Hit save, and that's it. Now let's close up the left side, right? Hitting Control B or Command B on a Mac. And now let's go into our CSS. First things first, I'm going to do a general reset. So start, we're going to select everything. We're going to take out all of our margins by setting them to 0, and all of our paddings by also setting them to 0. Now let's grab onto the body tag. what I'm going to do is edit font family. So font family, not font size, font and family. And just going to set here everything as sans serif. And for the background, I'm going to go with a hexadecimal color of hexam 3A5479, and that's it. It's just a bluish color. Okay, now I also want to set all of the colors now in the text as white. So I'm just going to go here with color for the entire body of hash and FFF. And one last thing, you could already see that our anchor tags up here are underlined and they have purple color. So what I'm going to do is, in order to take out the underline, just going to go up in my general reset and say text decoration. I'm going to set it to none. This is going to take out the underline. And also for the list items, we're going to create list items later on. I'm going to, actually these are list items. So if I would, boom, go in here. If I would take out the padding and the margin, just comment them out. You can see they have those white spots. I hate those disks. So I'm just going to take them out by grabbing on, right it in here. In the general reset, we're going to do a list style. We're going to set this to none. I'm going to take, that's going to take out all of, just going to comment back in, comment out the padding. You can see they're no longer there. Okay. So we're done with this part. Next, let's move on to the header. Now I want to push the header a bit, because actually I'm in CSS, so I'm just going to make this smaller. Yeah, I don't need you right now. And I'm going to make you larger. So you can see the SVG is styling itself. It's basically increasing because it has all the space it needs. We're going to take care of this just in a couple of seconds. But now back to our header tag. I'm going to take the header. I'm going to move it to the right side by calculating the margin to the left using the calculation in CSS. And I'm going to subtract from 100 viewport 100 viewport widths, not points, 70%. Okay, basically what this is going to do is, depending on how wide the viewport is, you see it's always going to retain 70% from the right side. So it's going to leave me with the margin to the left side with 30%. Okay, now let's grab onto the H1. Actually, I'm going to do a header, and then in H1, I'm going to set the color to hash. Actually, it's already set to white color, so I'm just going to increase its font size. Let's say 3 rem. You can do even more. Let's say 8 rem. Okay, next I'm going to give it a all-around margin of 3 rem, and there we go. It's going to push down the hamburger menu, so I just could go with 2.5. That's much better. Also going to change the hamburger just in a couple of seconds to a cheeseburger. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, so the next, we're going to grab our header and the image tag within that header. I'm going to change its width. Now it comes the interesting part, to fit content. So if you never use fit content, it's basically going to fit whatever the size of its container is. And then we're going to also give it a max width. Basically, we're going to limit it to only 600 pixels. So it's not going to be that large. Okay, and there we go. Now it's fitting its content size. Also, if I'm going to make this small, as you can see, it's going to always retain 30% from the left side, or minus 70% from the entire viewport width. Great. So now let's move on to our menu. Basically, we have a class of menu. So I'm going to grab onto that class menu, and I'm going to position it fixed, because as you can see now, position and fixed. As you saw in our finish project right here, it's to the left side. Okay, so we need to fix it to the left side of the viewport. So I just positioned it fixed. Now I'm going to tell it where it's fixed to. We're going to go with top, and not auto, but 0. It's basically here, 0. Then from the left side, also 0. And we're going to set the Z index to 1. This meaning that it's always going to be on the top of whatever is in the background. And our background is now right this part right here. Also, I'm going to let it occupy, so with 100 viewport widths, basically the entire width of the viewport. Now I'm doing this because in the next one, in our hamburger, that are our, okay, next up, let's take care of the hamburger. Basically this right here, so not this, but the hamburger button. So for this, we're going to grab onto the hamburger class, hamburger, and I'm going to display it as flex. Now, first of all, let me do something else. Let me grab onto those lines, dot line, and I'm going to give each one of them a color of, color of hash FFF, basically a white color. Now let's give them some kind of dimension. So I'm going to give them a width of 100% of its own container, and I'm going to give it a height only 3 pixels. And you should already see up there just in a couple of seconds. Not color, it's the background color. What am I doing? Background and color. Didn't I give them the class of line? But yes, they do have the class of line. Hamburger line. Okay, they're up here right now. That's so strange. Oh yeah, because now I need to style my hamburger. So the lines are in there, but we need to manipulate now the hamburger, their container, which is this div right here. I could have gone with an UL. No, forget about it. Let's just leave it as this. So let's change this. Why aren't they displaying as 3 lines underneath of one another? Well, because we need to display them first of all as flex, not inline, but flex. And now we can flex in a column direction. So flex direction, we're going to change this to column. We can change the width of the hamburger, so of their container, to 400 pixels. And there we go. Now it's much smaller because in the initial phase it had the width of the entire menu there, because they are in the menu, basically in this. So the hamburger is in here. So they took up 100% of their entire width. Now, because we changed this to only 40 pixels, each line has now 100% width, which means they have only 40 pixels. Now, let's change the height of the hamburger container. I'm going to change this to 30 pixels. And now I'm just going to add a margin of 20 pixels. Now, in order to see each one of those lines, we're going to justify the content with space between. And there we go. There are our lines. Also, I want, when I'm hovering over it, to have a cursor of pointer. Okay, it's cursor and pointer. And there we go. So now hovering over my hamburger, it's going to show me that I can click it. Now I want those lines to be a bit more pronounced. I'm going to go down to the lines. I'm going to add a box shadow of 1 pixel, 2 pixels, 2 pixels. And let's just also set the color as a RGB of 0, 0, and 0 for the blues. And also a 0.3 for the alpha. And there we go. Now they have a bit of a shadow. Okay, next let's take care of our drop-down menu here. So first things first, I'm going to grab onto the drop. Let me also scroll up a bit. Drop down class. And now I'm going to display it as none. So we can't see anything. I'm going to also comment it out because what kind of sense would this make? We're going to take care of this just in a couple of seconds. Okay, now let's position it absolute. I'm going to position it absolute because I want it to stick right here in our left side. We're going to position it absolute from the top with 70 pixels pushed down. And also from the left, I'm going to reset it to absolute 0. Now, the width of the container will be only 70 pixels. Sorry about that. It will be 120 pixels. And let me also give it a background color so you can see where this dropdown actually is of hash and hexadecimal BF6A and 40. Okay, and there's our yellowish, or is it orange? Orange, yeah, almost colorblind. Okay, now let's give it a height. You can see in our finished project, it has the height of, well, almost the entire viewport height, but because we have 70 pixels from the top, and if I give this now 100 viewport heights, then it's going to have a 100 viewport height of whatever rest it remains from that down push of 70 pixels. Okay, now let's make it pop a bit by giving it a box shadow of 0 and no, you know what? I'm going to go here with 2 pixels, 2 pixels, and 5 pixels, changing it up a bit, and RGBA of the same value. Okay, so you can see it right here. If I would turn this to 0, then take a look up here, turn it to 0. I can see it also has a bit of a box shadow here, but I don't like it that way. It's much more fun this way. Okay, let's also trim down the border. So this border right here, but actually I'm going to trim down all of the borders by giving it a border of 4 pixels. Let's say, yeah, that's perfect. Okay, we're done with our drop down. And right after our drop down, I'm going to select the drop down class again, and I'm also going to give it a class of open. Now, when this class will be active, when this class will exist, because right now it doesn't exist. If you take a look in your HTML, we only have drop down without the class of, basically here without the class of open. Now, when this class will exist, I'm also going to leave it now this way, then the drop down will be displayed as block. Okay, so now I can comment this back in, display none. But because we have the class of open, it's going to remain as block. I'm also going to leave it this way till I'm done with my CSS. Now for the LIs, for each of these list items. Let's select our drop down again. Let's say that each li within the drop down going to have a padding of a all-around padding of 10 pixels. Then the text decoration or text transform, we're going to transform everything to uppercase. Also going to give this the initial opacity of 0. So all of our allies will disappear. I'm going to comment this out. We're going to change it just in a couple of seconds. And now we're going to create here an animation. And also, first of all, let me give it a transition. I'm going to give this a transition to all of 0.2 seconds. And I'm doing this because our drop down, class of drop down, and LIs when I'm hovering over them, let's also scroll down a bit, they're going to change the background color when I'm hovering over them to hash, and we're going to select the same color as we have for the background for our body. And also the width should be 100%. Now, what does this do? Well, if I hover over one of them, you will see that it's kind of like it takes a chunk out of the menu. Okay, and also I do not like the width of this. Let me just take a look. Oh yeah, it's okay. I'm going to change just in a couple of seconds when I'm going to go to our anchor tag. So our drop down, again, the class of drop down, and the anchor tags within them. Let's change the colors. So color, let's change it to hash FFF, basically having a white color, and we're going to set, and that's basically it. Now, one last thing that I want to add to my drop down here is right after our width, I also want to add a padding. So let's add here padding. I'm going to go with 20 pixels from the top, then 0 right, 0 bottom, but to the left side I also want to have 20 pixels. I'm just going to push all of my items to the right side. Okay, now we have this effect. So now I'm going to jump to JavaScript because I want to make our dropdown actually work. So let's create our JavaScript file, open up the Explorer tag and new file. And let's just call it nav.js. Now we need to include this nav.js in, I'm going to close up the left side, in our body tag. So before the closing body tag ends, we're going to create here a script, and the source will be nav.js. So let's also open up, right click on our project, inspect, and let's open up the console. Let's just see if I'm going to actually zoom in here a bit. If we can console log here the string of nav, let's hit save, and we know that our JavaScript is linked up. Okay, I'm going to take this out, comment it out, and I'm also going to make this just a bit smaller, for you to see this better. So for our navigation, we need two things. First, I want to grab onto from the DOM to the hamburger. So let's just create here a variable called hamburger, and we're going to assign this to the document.query selector, and we're going to select our .hamburger class. So hamburger. Okay, and I'm going to go down here, console log hamburger, and especially if you're in your beginning stages, I would suggest to always do this, so you know, as already see, if you did or did not select something properly. Okay, next I'm going to create another const. I'm going to call this drop down, and now let's create so let's grab onto the drop down menu, drop down, forgetting an end there. Again, query selector, because we need to select the class again, and between quotations we're going to select the drop down class. Now you can just add here comma and now type in drop down, and you should see both of them selected. Perfect. Now you do remember that if we go to our HTML, only if this dropdown has the class of open will the dropdown be shown. So I'm also going to close up the console. Actually, let's just make it a bit smaller and clear up the console. So if I'm going to take out, delete this class, then the dropdown will hide. Now let's go back to our JavaScript file. And here we're going to grab onto the hamburger and say that we're going to add an event listener to it. And that event listener will be a click event. Now, if the click will be executed, or if this event will happen, then we're going to create a function, and this function will do an anonymous function. This function will do the following things. It's going to grab onto the drop down, and from its class list is going to toggle the open class. Open, what am I doing? Open, there we go. Meaning that now I'm going to do the element select. So I'm going to select this element right here, and let's just take a look at this drop down. What happens with it if I click on this hamburger now? And boom, there we go. The class of open just was added to our drop down. Also, you can see the the hamburger menu appearing, or the drop down appearing actually. If I click on it again, then it's going to toggle it. Remember, it's going to toggle, it's going to add and remove it. If it's added, it's going to remove it, and if it's removed, it's going to add it. So basically that's it for this part. Now next up, let's add to each of these little items a animation. So let's go back to our CSS. Also, I'm going to close up the console, we don't need this anymore. And now we need to create the animation. So let's create here add keyframes, and we're going to call this little keyframe fade in. Now when this fade in will happen, we're going to go from the opacity of 0 and a transform of translate on the x-axis, basically on the horizontal axis of minus 100 pixels. Let's scroll down a bit, and then it's going to go to, well, exactly the opposite, so to a opacity of 1 and I could actually just copy this, paste it down here, and to a transform of 0. Now having this said and done, now we need to include our animation somewhere, and we're going to include it in our dropdown LIs, basically right here. So our dropdown LIs, let's add here the animation. First, the name will be fade in. It's going to take 0.5 seconds. It's going to have a animation speed of easing out, and it's going to have a effect of forwards. Okay, you just saw each of them animating in. So when I'm going to open this drop down, is going to animate in all of my items. If I'm going to hide it, we can no longer see it, and if we open them, then all of them come in at the same time. So we need to take care of the fact that all of them should come in with a bit of a delay. Now, if you don't know how to add delays to items, we're going to select each child element from the LIs on its own. So the way we do this, we're going to come down here, class of dropdown LI, and we can select each child from them. So I'm going to select LI using the mchild selector, and I'm going to select the very first one. And we're going to add to this a animation delay of 0.1 second. Now I'm going to do this to all 4 of them. So let's just copy this 1, 2, 3 times, because we have 4 elements. Let's replace this with 2, and the time will be 15.15. Then the third one is going to be 3. The time will be 0.3. We're just going to go with multiples. And the last one will be number 4. And we're going to replace this with, let's just see, 45. Okay, so now, as you can see, if we close it up and bring it back in, what are we doing here? Because the transition effect is happening before that. So let me just redo the, oh yeah, I forgot to add the opacity to comment this back in. So now if we hide them, then they're going to come back in. Just as I said, this opacity makes actually when we reanimate this, it's going to hide them. So they're going to start with 0, but then the animation is also going to start with 0. This is why we can't see them when we're opening our hamburger menu. Okay, so as I promised, we're going to change something in here. So you do know that this event listener can actually be written much shorter. So we're going to grab onto the hamburger, and now we're going to add the event listener of click directly to this hamburger by typing in on click. Okay, now we're going to assign this to an anonymous arrow function. And because arrow functions don't need curly brackets if they only have one argument, then we're going to take our drop down.classList and toggle, and we're going to toggle the class of open. Whoops, not capital O, just open. Okay, let's just hit save and let's comment this out, and you will see it's going to have exactly the same effect. Okay, so hope you enjoyed this little project. Pretty simple hamburger menu, and also the drop down. Extremely simple how we can achieve this only with just a couple of lines of code. So hope you enjoyed this project.